7 years. That's how long Melissa and I had been married. Though if you'd asked me back then, I would have told you it felt like forever, and not in the good way. People say marriages either harden into something unbreakable or quietly rot by year 7. Ours, it was already decomposing, and I'd been pretending not to smell the stench. Have you ever told yourself a lie so many times you almost believed it? That was me, clinging to the fantasy that if I worked harder, smiled longer, bought more flowers, maybe the spark could be relit. But denial has an expiration date. Mine ended with one ridiculous, life-shattering text message from Las Vegas. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember the kitchen light humming above me, the faint scent of leftover coffee, the lazy whir of the ceiling fan stirring stale air. I was scrolling through my phone out of habit more than interest, my thumbs swiping endlessly, searching for something to distract me from the silence. The kind of silence that isn't restful, but heavy. Melissa had been away on business for 4 days. A retreat, she called it. Funny word, retreat. She wasn't retreating back to me. And then my phone buzzed. One vibration. One notification. It looked harmless at first, the way a snake in tall grass looks like just another twig until it moves. I opened it without thinking. Just married in Vegas. For a second, my brain refused to register the words. Married? My wife, still legally my wife, was announcing a wedding? I stared, waiting for the punchline, the LOL, just kidding. But there it was. Her name on the sender line. A photo attached. Melissa, veil slightly crooked, bouquet of plastic roses in her hand, smiling wider than she had in years. And standing beside her, with his smug arm wrapped around her waist, was Tyler Scott, the coworker, the guy who always lingered a little too long when he said goodbye, who laughed at her jokes harder than anyone else. My hands trembled, the phone slick in my grip. You'd expect rage, right? Or heartbreak. Maybe screaming, maybe tears. But none of that came. Instead, the world slowed, like a movie reel skipping a frame. The air felt colder. The silence around me deepened, pressing against my chest. And in that moment, clarity cut sharper than any pain. She wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never had been. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling fan, as if it might spin me back to a time when we were still us. 7 years of memories bled through my mind. Our first date, when her laugh felt like a secret meant only for me. Our cramped first apartment, where we celebrated having nothing but each other. The whispered promises in the dark, vows of always and no matter what. All of it, reduced to a drunken Vegas ceremony under neon lights. But here's what no one tells you. Sometimes betrayal doesn't break you. Sometimes it chisels you into something harder, stronger, more dangerous. Melissa thought she'd humiliated me, blindsided me, stripped me of power. She couldn't have been more wrong. Because that text wasn't the end of my story. It was ignition, a spark of something ruthless I didn't know I had inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even reply with a paragraph of wounded questions. I just sat there, feeling the shift inside me. If this was the game Melissa wanted to play, then fine. I'd play. But I wouldn't be the victim. I'd be the one writing the rules. And what Melissa didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly predicted, was that her Vegas stunt would turn out to be the greatest mistake of her life. Because the night she said, "I do," to another man while still wearing my last name, that was the night my story truly began. When I think back to the night I first saw Melissa, it feels less like a memory and more like a movie I once watched. One of those glossy romances where you already know the ending, but you let yourself believe anyway. I wasn't supposed to be at that networking event. A colleague had dragged me there, promising opportunities, though the only thing in the room was the clink of cheap wine glasses and the rustle of business cards destined for trash bins. And then, across the dimly lit bar, I saw her. Melissa Carter. She had that kind of presence that makes you think the entire room revolves around her. She was laughing at something a man said, though her eyes betrayed her, sharp, calculating, always scanning, always measuring. I didn't notice that then. All I saw was someone radiant, magnetic, a woman who seemed untouchable. She noticed me, too. Funny how I remember the smallest detail, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear as if signaling me across the room. Was it deliberate? A test? I'll never know. But I do remember the boldness in her step as she walked over, heels clicking like a countdown. Before I could even say hello, she asked what I did for a living. That was Melissa, straight to the point, always looking for the angle. We talked about careers, ambitions, travel, the usual small talk, but with her, it didn't feel small. It felt intoxicating. By the end of the night, I was asking for her number. Within months, we were inseparable. By the end of the year, I was sliding a ring onto her finger under the dim glow of our favorite restaurant's chandelier. The early years. They were good. No, better than good. They were golden. We moved into our first townhouse, painted the walls ourselves, filled the place with mismatched furniture and laughter. We adopted Max, a scruffy rescue dog who became the heartbeat of our little family. Sunday mornings were perfect. Coffee brewing, Melissa humming along to old songs on the radio, wearing one of my shirts and smiling at me like I was her whole world. For a while, I thought we were untouchable. The couple people admired, the ones who had beaten the odds. We had dreams bigger than our budget, but that didn't matter. We whispered promises about vacations we couldn't afford, kids we hadn't yet had, futures we thought we could shape by sheer willpower. But here's the thing about promises. They don't mean a damn thing to reality. The cracks came quietly. At first, disguised as exhaustion, stress, long days at work. We told ourselves it was just a rough patch, the kind every marriage hits. We buried our doubts under late nights and busy schedules, hoping love would carry the weight. But love alone isn't enough. Not when one person starts drifting while the other clings too hard. I should have noticed sooner. Her laugh didn't come as easily anymore. Her phone became her best friend, glowing in the dark long after she thought I was asleep. When I kissed her goodnight, her lips felt cold, distracted. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was nothing. But I was lying. Because the truth? Our happily ever after was already crumbling long before Las Vegas. I just didn't want to admit it. And the first fracture, the one that cut deepest, came with a single word. A word that still makes my stomach tighten when I hear it. Infertility. Infertility. It's a word you never think will belong to you. It belongs to strangers, to whispered conversations you overhear but never imagine living. Until one day, a doctor says it out loud, and suddenly the word brands itself onto your skin. I remember the office, too bright, too sterile, the smell of disinfectant clinging to the air like false hope. Melissa's hand tightened around mine as the physician explained test results we didn't want to hear. We nodded, thanked him, walked out with brave faces. But the silence in the car afterward? That said more than words ever could. At first, we fought it. Specialists. Treatments. Pills lined up on the counter like soldiers, calendars marked with appointments and injections. Every month was the same cycle. Hope rising, anticipation building, disappointment crashing. Wash, rinse, repeat. Do you know how cruel it feels to pin your joy on a single line on a test strip, only to watch it fail again and again? It grinds you down. It ground Melissa down most of all. She didn't lean on me. She withdrew. I tried to tell her it didn't matter, that kids weren't the only way to build a life together. But when I spoke, she looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Eventually, she stopped talking about it at all. And then she found a new obsession: work. Late nights blurred into weekends. Her laptop became her companion, her office her escape. At first, I convinced myself it was healthy, her way of coping, of distracting herself from the pain. But the longer it went on, the more I realized it wasn't about distraction. It was about running, from me, from us, from the silence that now lived in our home. I wasn't innocent either. Instead of forcing us to confront it, I buried myself in routines. Overtime at work, extra hours at the gym, pointless projects around the house. Anything to avoid sitting across from her at the dinner table, staring at the distance growing wider between us. We became roommates. Ghosts. Two people who passed in the hallway but didn't really see each other. Our conversations shrank to bills, groceries, Max's vet visits. Our bed felt too big, the gap between us colder than any winter night. Love doesn't disappear in a blaze, it erodes. Slowly, quietly, like paper dissolving in the rain. I told myself it was temporary, that once we healed from the disappointment, we'd find our way back. But deep down, I knew better. Melissa wasn't just drifting. She was searching for something or someone else. The signs were there, screaming at me in ways I tried to ignore. Late-night phone calls she took in another room. Sudden shopping sprees. New clothes, new perfume. A new spark in her eyes that wasn't meant for me. One night, I came home early. She was at the dining table, phone in hand, smiling. Really smiling. In a way I hadn't seen in years. The second she noticed me, her expression shuddered. She locked the screen, muttered some flimsy excuse. And that was the moment. The cold certainty that pierced deeper than any diagnosis. Melissa wasn't slipping away. She was already gone. Melissa's late nights began with excuses that sounded reasonable. The new project is intense, Daniel. If I want that promotion, I've got to pull my weight. She said it casually, like it was obvious, like I should be proud she was sacrificing her time for ambition. And I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. So I played the supportive husband. I reheated dinners that went untouched. I left the porch light on. I waited up until exhaustion forced me to surrender. But one late night became three. Three became weekends. Soon, the woman I called my wife was a phantom, slipping in and out like a tenant who paid no rent. Even Max would sit by the front door, ears twitching at every car that passed, waiting for her return. Sometimes he waited in vain. When she did come home, it was always with the same script: fake exhaustion, a quick shower, a peck on the cheek that tasted of guilt. I watched her purse land on the counter, receipts buried too quickly, perfume clinging to her skin and notes I didn't recognize. Once, I hugged her goodnight and caught a faint whiff of cologne that wasn't mine. Do you know that moment when your gut knows the truth, but your heart begs you not to listen? That was me. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was happening. But I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. So instead, I convinced myself that if I carried more of the load, maybe she'd drift back to me. I became her shield. I took over the finances, handled the bills, canceled her dreaded meetings with accountants. I even refinanced the mortgage alone so she wouldn't have to worry. I thought I was buying her freedom from stress. I thought she'd see I was still the man she could lean on. And for a brief, fragile moment, it worked. She smiled again. She laughed at one of my jokes, a real laugh, not the hollow one I'd grown used to. For a flicker of time, I thought we'd found our rhythm again. But masks, they always slip. Her phone buzzed more than ever, always face down on the table, always clutched too tightly in her hand. She started traveling. A couple nights here, 3 nights there. She gave me no flight details, just vague promises of return. I remember standing in the doorway once, suitcase at her side, as she brushed past me without so much as a glance. Each lie was rehearsed, polished to perfection. No hesitation, no stumble. Melissa had become a stranger in my own home, an actress who wore my wife's face. I tried once to pierce the act. I suggested a trip, just us, away from the noise. Her reaction was instant, sharp as broken glass. I can't just drop everything, Daniel. Not everyone has the luxury of slowing down. Her words sliced deeper than she knew. I stood frozen, staring at her, realizing the truth I had been running from. She didn't see me as her partner anymore. She saw me as a burden. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan while Max curled at my feet. The silence between us was louder than any argument. The woman who once hummed old songs on Sunday mornings had vanished. In her place was someone cold, unreachable. But here's the thing about masks. They don't just slip. They shatter. And Melissa's was about to break in the most spectacular way imaginable. I refused to let go without a fight. Maybe that makes me stubborn. Maybe it makes me pathetic. But back then, I believed love was supposed to be work. And so I worked. I planned date nights at restaurants where we'd once laughed over greasy appetizers and cheap wine. I bought tickets to shows, left little notes in her purse, even booked a weekend getaway to the cabin where we'd celebrated an anniversary. She brushed them all aside. Not tonight. I'm tired. Maybe another time. Work is insane right now. And the one that cut deepest. Daniel, stop trying so hard. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing. That's what my devotion had become. Still, I didn't stop. I thought if I could just remind her of who we were, maybe she'd remember too. I suggested therapy, desperate to untangle the knots choking our marriage. I even found a counselor, set the appointment, and slid the card across the kitchen table like it was a lifeline. She didn't just refuse. She laughed. You think some stranger is going to fix us? You're delusional. That laugh, it wasn't amused. It was sharp, cold, almost cruel. The kind of sound that sticks in your ribs like a splinter. Do you know what it feels like to bare your soul, only to have it mocked? It's worse than silence. And that was when her edges started to sharpen. My questions about her late nights weren't met with excuses anymore. They were met with attacks. You're paranoid. You're controlling. You're the problem, not me. Somehow, every concern I raised was twisted, turned back on me, until I began to wonder if maybe I really was losing my mind. Gaslighting. It's a word I didn't understand then, but I lived it. And then came the threats. It was a Tuesday night. I'd just asked, gently, if we could at least spend one evening together without her phone buzzing on the table. She snapped. If you keep pushing me, Daniel, I swear I'll make you regret it. I'll take everything. This house, the money, all of it. You'll be left with nothing. She stood there in the middle of our living room, eyes blazing, voice shaking with fury. For the first time, I saw her with the mask fully off. No warmth, no pretense, just contempt. I didn't yell back. I didn't argue. I just stared at her, stunned, realizing how far we'd fallen. This wasn't the woman I had married. This wasn't the woman who once hummed old songs on Sunday mornings. This was someone else entirely. Someone who wore her face but carried none of her soul. And something shifted in me that night. The part of me still clinging to hope began to die. The fight drained out, replaced by a grim kind of acceptance. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her obstacle. Still, habit is a powerful thing. I tried to hold on, even if only by my fingernails. I told myself maybe, just maybe, she'd realize what she was destroying before it was too late. But deep down, I already knew. Melissa wasn't just lost. She had crossed a line, and there was no coming back. And not long after her threat, she gave me a new excuse, a week-long team retreat. In Las Vegas. When Melissa told me about the Las Vegas retreat, her voice carried that rehearsed edge, the kind of tone you use when you've practiced a lie in the mirror. She stood in the kitchen doorway, suitcase already half-packed upstairs, firing off excuses before I could ask a single question. It's mandatory, Daniel. Team bonding, workshops, client meetings. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I asked just one thing. Who's going? Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. A tiny crack in the mask. Then came the explosion. God, do you not trust me at all? Why do you have to interrogate me like I'm some criminal? She stormed off, muttering about how I suffocated her. That night, I lay awake in our bed, staring at the empty side where she should have been. The sheets were cold, untouched. My gut screamed at me. Something wasn't right. But I was so tired. Tired of the screaming, the circular fights, the way every question I asked came back to paint me as the villain. So I stayed quiet. Days passed. The house felt emptier than ever. Even the walls seemed to lean in with suspicion. Max barely ate. I buried myself in work, in routine, anything to avoid imagining what she was doing in Las Vegas. But truth doesn't hide forever. Sometimes, it comes to you in the cruelest, most absurd ways. I was making coffee one morning when my phone buzzed on the counter. Harmless. Ordinary. I picked it up without a second thought. And my world tilted. Just married in Vegas. Clinking glasses ring party popper. Her name was at the top of the message. My wife. My still wife. Attached was a photo that didn't belong to my life. Yet there it was, glowing in my hand. Melissa, in a cheap white dress, veil askew, clutching a bouquet of plastic roses, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. And beside her, Tyler Scott, the smirking coworker I'd met once at a barbecue. The one who held her gaze too long, shook my hand too hard. Now he had his arm around her waist, his smile wide, his ring flashing under neon lights. My first reaction wasn't rage. It wasn't sorrow. It was disbelief so sharp it felt almost comical. Melissa, standing under cheap chandeliers, declaring herself married while she was still bound to me. I stared at the screen, waiting for the punchline. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe she was drunk. Maybe this was some twisted corporate stunt. But the longer I looked, the clearer it became. There was no joke. She meant it. And in that bizarre, devastating moment, something inside me crystallized. I didn't break. I didn't beg. I didn't type back a flood of wounded questions. I just stood there, holding my phone, feeling clarity settle like ice in my veins. And then I replied. One word. Cool. That was it. Cool. Because while Melissa thought she'd humiliated me, stripped me of power, blindsided me beyond repair, the truth was, she'd just handed me a weapon sharper than any blade. She thought she'd won. But that message wasn't her victory. It was my awakening. And she had no idea. The war had only just begun. After I sent that single word, cool, I set my phone down and felt something I hadn't in months. Clarity. Melissa thought her little Vegas stunt had checkmated me. But she didn't realize she'd just freed me. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. The first call I made was to Jonathan Blake. Jonathan and I had been friends since college. While I buried myself in the corporate grind, he'd carved a name for himself in family law. Not just any lawyer, a shark. The kind of man who could dismantle an opponent without ever raising his voice. When I told him what happened, he didn't gasp. He didn't curse. He simply said, "All right, here's what you're going to do. Step 1, freeze the accounts." Within minutes, I had logged into our joint bank account and cut Melissa off from every dollar. I canceled her cards, rerouted my paycheck into a private account only I could touch. Step 2, secure the house. I dug out the deed and reminded myself that only my name, mine alone, was on it. A locksmith arrived that afternoon. By sundown, every lock had been changed. Melissa's key was nothing but dead metal. Step 3, cut the strings. I killed every subscription tied to our finances. Streaming services, gym memberships, even her boutique wine deliveries. One by one, I severed the lines she could use to drain me. It was ruthless, cold, efficient, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was acting. Jonathan's voice was calm, sharp, surgical. "She's going to come back furious, Daniel. She's going to spin this, try to make you the villain. Don't take the bait. Stick to the plan." And I did. 3 days later, Melissa finally returned. I heard her heels clattering up the driveway before I saw her. Her suitcase rattled behind her like a drumbeat. Then, pounding on the front door, "Daniel, open up. What the hell is going on?" I waited a beat before I turned the lock. Opened the door just enough for her to see me standing there, arms crossed. Her face twisted with outrage. "Why are the locks changed?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply held up the deed, her eyes flicking down to the paper with my name stamped in bold. "Because this isn't your home anymore." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She threatened to call the police, her voice sharp with panic. "Go ahead," I said, stepping back. "But bring them quick. Because right now, you're trespassing." For once, Melissa didn't have a script ready. She stood there, trembling, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Rage, panic, disbelief. It all crashed together in her expression, and I drank it in. For years, she had humiliated me, belittled me, hollowed out everything I thought we were. And now, she was the one on the outside, pounding on a door she no longer had the right to open. That was the night I knew I'd turned the tables. And yet, as satisfying as it was only the beginning. Because Jonathan had uncovered something Melissa never expected. Something that would make her Vegas stunt look like child's play. Melissa didn't wait long to make good on her threat. 10 minutes after I shut the door, the night outside exploded in red and blue. Police lights danced across the windows, sirens fading as a cruiser pulled into the driveway. 2 officers stepped out, calm, practiced, the look of men who'd seen this scene 100 times before. Domestic dispute. Another Tuesday night. Melissa ran toward them, tears streaking down her cheeks like she'd been rehearsing the role all week. "He locked me out of my own home. He's controlling me, manipulating me. You have to do something." They turned to me, waiting from my side. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pace. I simply walked inside, came back with the folder Jonathan had told me to keep ready, and handed it over. The taller officer flipped through the papers, his brows lifting slightly. The house deed. My name, mine alone, stamped across the front in bold letters. Not a trace of hers. He turned back to her. "Ma'am, your name isn't on here. Legally, he's the sole owner." The transformation on her face was almost cinematic. 1 second, she was weeping like a victim. The next, her tears dried instantly, replaced by a brittle laugh that rang false in the cold night air. "Oh, come on. This is just a misunderstanding. A joke. You know, Vegas, weddings, it was all just fun. Nothing serious." A joke. That was her defense. The officers didn't laugh. One of them crossed his arms, unimpressed. Ma'am, if you don't reside here legally, you can't force entry. You'll need to leave for tonight. Her cheeks flushed crimson, anger bubbling just beneath her skin. She spun toward me, eyes blazing. You're really going to do this to me, Daniel? After everything? I met her fury with calm. You already did this to yourself, Melissa. For a moment, the world went silent. Even Max, standing just behind me, let out a low growl, his hackles rising as if he too could smell her desperation. The officers gave her a few minutes to collect her belongings. I stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching as she stomped through the house, slamming drawers, yanking clothes from hangers. Little performances of defiance meant to rattle me. They didn't. Not anymore. Finally, she dragged her suitcase to the door and stopped inches from me. Her voice dropped, venomous. You think you've won, don't you? This isn't over. I leaned closer, letting each word land like a blade. You're right. It's not over. But you won't like how it ends. Her eyes flickered, just a twitch, but I saw it. Fear, buried beneath the rage. She stormed off into the night, the cruiser's headlights swallowing her as the officers drove her away. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This time it was mine, and Jonathan's warning echoed in my head. She's going to try every angle, every lie, every trick. Don't take the bait. Let her bury herself. As it turned out, she was already digging. Because what Jonathan uncovered next wasn't just humiliating. It was criminal. 2 days after the police dragged Melissa off into the night, my phone buzzed. Jonathan's name lit up the screen. His voice was calm, measured, but beneath it, I heard the edge of something sharp. The sound of a man who'd just discovered a weapon. Daniel, he said, your wife's little Vegas ceremony. It wasn't just some drunken stunt. Legally, it's binding. I nearly dropped my coffee. What are you talking about? She can't be married. She's still my wife. Exactly, Jonathan replied. And that's where it gets interesting. What Melissa did, that's bigamy. It's a felony in Nevada. The word hung in the air, heavy as lead. Bigamy. Melissa hadn't just betrayed me. She had broken the law. But Jonathan wasn't finished. It gets better. Tyler Scott, your wife's new husband. He's already married. Legally. A woman in Arizona. His marriage license is still active, which means their Vegas wedding isn't just reckless, it's a criminal mess. For a moment, the room tilted around me. I set the mug down, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. Melissa had always believed she was the smartest person in the room, the puppeteer pulling the strings. And now, she'd tied herself into a knot so tight there was no way out. Jonathan laid out the evidence like a surgeon laying out scalpels. Certified copies of marriage records, time-stamped photos from Vegas, receipts, even a statement from Tyler's real wife, livid and ready to testify. Melissa and Tyler hadn't just humiliated themselves. They had walked straight into felony territory, fraud, bigamy, misrepresentation. Meanwhile, I was insulated, protected. The accounts were secure, the house untouchable, lawyers' fees already budgeted. I wasn't the one with a noose tightening around my neck. Melissa, on the other hand, was unraveling. She called. She texted. She begged me to meet just to talk. When I ignored her, her tone shifted. Rage. Accusations. Threats. Each voicemail a performance. Her voice cracking between fury and desperation. But every message was also another nail in the coffin. Proof of instability. Evidence of guilt. Jonathan was right. All I had to do was sit back and let her bury herself. The day we filed the paperwork, I walked out of the courthouse lighter than I'd felt in years. Relief, sadness, vindication, they all swirled together, but one emotion rose above the rest, satisfaction. For so long, Melissa had made me feel powerless, cornered, small. Now, she was the one answering to judges and lawyers, her perfect image shattering piece by piece. Still, a part of me couldn't help but wonder, how far would she fall? Would it be just a slap on the wrist? A fine? Probation? And then Jonathan sent me one last file. A police report, freshly stamped. Melissa wasn't just facing divorce. She was officially under criminal investigation. And the public humiliation that followed, that would be the final nail in her coffin. Courtrooms have a smell. not of polished wood or perfume, but of tension soaked into the walls after years of broken marriages and shattered promises. That was the smell that clung to me as I sat in the gallery, watching the woman I once loved sit at the defendant's table. Melissa looked nothing like the wife I had married. Her hair hung flat, her skin pale, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She avoided my gaze, but every few seconds she tried to steal a glance, as if searching for the Daniel she used to manipulate. That Daniel was gone. The charges were read aloud. Bigamy, fraud, misrepresentation. Words that had once belonged to courtroom dramas now wrapped themselves around my ex-wife. Each syllable seemed to chip away at her facade, leaving her smaller, frilier. Jonathan sat beside me, perfectly calm. He leaned in once, murmured, "Don't react." I didn't. I kept my face still, my hands folded, as Melissa tried to summon tears that never came. Her defense was pitiful. She claimed the Vegas wedding was a silly mistake, a joke gone too far. She blamed alcohol, Tyler, the crazy energy of the Strip. But the evidence was stacked high: marriage license, receipts, time-stamped photos, witness statements. And then, like the final nail in a coffin, Tyler's legal wife, arms crossed, expression stone cold, sat in the gallery, glaring daggers at the woman who had tried to steal her husband. The judge wasn't moved. Melissa's act crumbled beneath the weight of facts she couldn't twist. The verdict came swift: fines, probation, mandatory counseling. No prison, but a permanent mark on her record. The kind of stain employers don't forgive. But her real punishment wasn't the law. It was humiliation. News spread quickly through her office. Within a week, she was fired. Friends who once praised her success stopped answering her calls. The woman who lived for appearances had lost the one thing she valued most: her reputation. I should have felt triumphant. Maybe part of me did. But more than anything, I felt free. For years, I had been shackled by her lies, her contempt, her cruelty. I had been the man on the outside looking in, desperate to hold on. And now? Now I was untethered. I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand, knowing my finances were secure, my home untouchable. Melissa, meanwhile, was left scrambling. No husband, no job, no safety net. She had tried to destroy me. Instead, she destroyed herself. Funny how life works. Looking back, I don't see Las Vegas as the end of my marriage. I see it as the beginning of my freedom. Melissa thought she'd dealt me my lowest blow, but in truth, she gave me the greatest gift of all: the chance to rebuild without her shadow. So while she drowned in the wreckage of her choices, I walked away, divorced, financially secure, and finally at peace. The irony? That ridiculous Vegas wedding, her act of betrayal, was the best thing Melissa Carter ever did for me.